Wallace Loh， 马里兰大学校长，拥有密西根大学心理学博士学位及耶鲁大学法学学位。作为美国仅有2所研究性大学亚裔大学校长之一，5月18日，陆博士做客马州 Gettysburg High School， 畅谈对于亚裔如何融入美国社会的独特见解和良好建议。
Tonight, I appoint you honorary terms. So, Judy, you were saying I'm the boss. Well, I should share this with you. Yes, the University of Maryland does have 40,000 or so students, another 10,000 faculty and staff, has a budget of $2.2 billion, has over $500 million of federal research funding. So often people come up to me and say, well, being president of the University of Maryland College Park, isn't that like being the CEO of a major corporation? And I have to disabuse them of that notion, that I'm the CEO or the boss. Because you see, the president of the university is more like the director of a cemetery. Lots of people under me, but nobody listens. Because that's the nature of a university. It is not top-down, like it is in a corporate setting or in a military setting, but nor is it bottom-up, in which, it's plebiscitary governance, see which way the wind is blowing. It is a form of academic democracy where the president is the executive branch, the Senate is the legislative branch, there are other organizations that are equivalent to the judiciary, and it is governance among equals. It is truly a form of academic democracy. But in any event, so I've been asked to share with you some thoughts for a few moments, given the fact that this is the Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and the topic I was given was Asian Americans and civic engagement. So I was reflecting on this, and then it occurred to me, Asian Americans. You know what's interesting? There are Asians in America. I've never heard of any Asians in Asia. Seriously. Those of you who've traveled in Asia, does anybody identify himself or herself as an Asian? No. They're Chinese, they're Japanese, they're Vietnamese, they're Korean, they're Filipinos, they're Indians. They identify themselves by nationality. But why is it then that when Asians are in America, well, all of a sudden they're supposed to assume a pan-Asian identity? That's a very interesting phenomenon. And I would suggest, because this pan-Asian identity, where sure, there are Chinese Americans and Filipino Americans, but for the most part, we identify ourselves in the United States as Asian Americans. It is rooted in a long tradition that is based upon immigration laws that were exclusionary, that this was a country that was initially founded where citizenship was, to a large extent, determined by race. And it also reflects the struggles for justice and equity of persons of color, in this case, Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, Filipino Americans, and so on and so forth. So, with that by way of background, I thought I would share with you a little bit about the history of Asian Americans in very broad scope. How, as I look around this room, and I know that many of you are the parents, are in professional fields, are in technical fields, very successful in your careers. And we are where we are today because of those who came before us. Those who came in the Japanese who came in the 1840s, who subsequently helped transform the vast deserts of the West into thriving farmlands. The Chinese who came and helped build the transcontinental railroads and then worked in factories. And they were all sojourners. They were all here in a land that did not recognize them as citizens. That was in the 19th century. And by the time we got to the 20th century, we went from Asian sojourners to American citizens. But we are American citizens because of the hardships that they endured, the prejudice that they encountered, the bittersweet struggles that they had as persons in the land that did not consider them to be fully citizens. So we stand on the shoulders of those who come before us. And now, of course, we're in the 21st century, and the question is, do we move from a sojourner to a fellow citizen to leadership in American society? America is one of those countries, one of those few countries that is a work in progress. For over, over 240 years. This country has been evolving and changing to fully realize the values and the principles that are recorded in the founding documents. We, as immigrants, some of you are native born, but I'm an immigrant, many of you in this room are immigrants. America has changed us. And we are now in the process of changing America. That is what's meant by the United States being the first multicultural, multi-ethnic democracy in the world. So let me share with you very briefly my history. I was born in China, and at a very early age, 1 or 2 years old, I ended up in Peru. I consider myself a Latasian. That's a Latino Asian. Because we spoke Chinese at home, spoke Spanish outside the home in school. So today, the only language I can speak without a trace of an accent is Spanish. Because I speak Chinese with a Spanish accent. And when I came to this country at the age of 15, because my parents by that time were political refugees, they could not come to this country. As you recall, back in those days, there was, the number of Chinese who would come to America was severely limited. So I came by myself at the age of 15. My parents gave me $300, the life savings that they had, working on the little grocery store, 10, 12 hours a day, 364 days a year. The only day off was Christmas. And they gave me their life savings and wished me well in the United States. And so, of course, I came here without knowing English, had no friends, no family, and had to learn English. So, of course, today I speak English with a mix of Chinese and Spanish accent. So I ended up in a tiny school in Iowa. I first went to the US Embassy, and there were only 2 college catalogs. One was from a school called Vassar College. So I didn't bring along my dictionary, I just wrote them in a letter, and they wrote back saying, "Thank you for your interest, but we're a women's college." The second, no, there were 3 catalogs. The second catalog I found was from a school called St. Mary of the Woods in St. Mary of the Woods, Indiana. So I wrote to them, and they wrote back saying, "Well, thank you for your interest, but we're a school for nuns." And the third one was a small school in Iowa, Grinnell College, and they said, "Well, you're welcome to come, we can provide you with a partial scholarship of $500. That would pay for about 1/3 of the tuition back in those days. And a job in the kitchen of the college cafeteria, washing pots and pans 3 hours a night, 7 days a week, and you get a free meal. And you can choose what you want, so I chose dinner, and had some leftovers what I used for breakfast and lunch. It was very difficult to learn English, terribly homesick. I didn't know anybody in the middle of Iowa. Grinnell College, we called it Grim Hell because it was in the middle of a cornfield. But I also realized I had no way of going back. It was either make it or, well, I guess be kicked out and deported. And I tell you this story because people help me. Some of the most generous people on this earth I found in the Midwest of this country. I had lots of part-time jobs. One of them was washing cars on weekends. And there would be a line of cars, 10, 15 cars, and some of them were pretty clean. And I would charge $1 per car until it dawned upon me that the people were dropping off the cars to be washed just in order so I could earn some money. And I still remember, I had a C- average the first semester. I was about to flunk out because I was supposed to have a B average, to keep my little scholarship. And this professor takes me to a big university in Iowa called University of Iowa and says to me, someday you'll come here and get a PhD. And I'm saying to myself, I don't even know that I will graduate from my freshman year. But he encouraged me, and his confidence became my support. And I tell you this story because I went on to finish college, get a master's from Cornell, a PhD from the University of Michigan. I then went to Europe, to the University of Leuven, in Leuven, Belgium, where I spent 1.5 years as a graduate research fellow, and then came back to get a JD from Yale Law School. And you fast forward, and I should also tell you that my passion at that time was to go to law school. When I graduated from college, I applied to 8 different law schools in this country, and they all turned me down. That's when I decided to go to Europe. And when I came back, finished my PhD, I applied to the same law schools in this country. Every single law school admitted me 5 years later. What was the difference? My undergraduate GPA was still the same. My test scores were still the same. The difference was affirmative action had come to America. And therefore, I was admitted. So I tell you this story simply to communicate this point I made to about 4,500 freshmen every year that I welcome every fall. And my message to them is I tell them my story, not because it's of any significance beyond me, because it's really the story of the importance of education. It is the story of the opportunities that this country provides. It is about the evolution of this country to becoming more equal as it is enshrined in the founding documents of our country. It is about the promise of the American dream that, in my view, is still very much alive today. Never let where you came from determine how far you will go. So that leads me to the present, more or less to the present. I was told to share with you a little bit about my background, which is that's what I'm doing. And to fast forward a little bit, I went on to become a lawyer in New York and in San Francisco, then became a professor of law at the University of Washington. This was in the mid-70s, and amazingly, this is the mid-1970s. West of the Mississippi River, there were only 2 Asian American law professors in the whole country. I was one of them, and the other one was in, I forget where, Stanford or Berkeley. 2 west of the Mississippi River. And then I moved on to become provost, dean of the law school, provost at the University of Colorado. And I should tell you that I worked also for almost 3 years as the chief policy advisor to Gary Lott, who's Asian American, Chinese American, when he was governor of the state of Washington. And I mentioned that because we became very close, and it's one of those very interesting coincidences. He's from Seattle. He went to high school in Seattle and went to Yale for college. And he applied to the University of Washington Law School for admission, and he was turned down. And later in life, when we met, I said, Gary, I also applied to the University of Washington Law School, and I got turned down the first time. And here we are 30 years later. You are the governor of the state of Washington, and I'm the dean of the University of Washington Law School. That can only happen in America. And so I ended up eventually at the University of Maryland. I find it absolutely amazing that among Asian Americans, who constitute a very substantial proportion, well, depending on the school, but Asian Americans are probably the largest non-white students in American college campuses. For example, at UCLA, Asian Americans are close to 45%. That's why UCLA stands for not only University of California, Los Angeles, but United Caucasians lost among Asians. But there's another message here. With a very significant proportion of Asian American students, I don't know if you realize this, but in the entire country, there are only 2 Chinese Americans who are presidents of major research universities. Only 2. Is there perhaps a bamboo ceiling? Now, one has to also place this in perspective. When I came to this country, it was in the early 60s. The dominant paradigm was assimilation. And the metaphor was a melting pot. That people from all over the world, regardless of their background, they come here, they melt in this melting pot, and they become Americans. And you all know that that does not happen that easily. Because until the early 60s, persons of color were less than 10% of the population. America was a microcosm of Europe. Then by the late 60s and into the 70s, the paradigm was no longer about assimilation, meaning all the differences are melted away. This is a nation of homogenized Americans. We moved from assimilation to multiculturalism. That America was becoming increasingly not only a microcosm of Europe, but a microcosm of the world. And therefore, the metaphor was no longer about a melting pot. It's about recognizing the importance of diversity, the uniqueness of different cultures and faiths that enrich this country. That's what makes it multicultural. And the metaphor was a mosaic, a wall in which every tile representing different genders, gender orientations, race, faith, and so on, all shine brightly and separately on this mosaic. And I've always asked myself, if America is a mosaic of that rich diversity, what holds this country together? So we move to the present. So we move from, in my view, from assimilation, a melting pot, to multiculturalism, a mosaic. How would I characterize America today? Tribalism. We are all tribes. There is a polarization that I have not encountered in my 50 plus years that I've lived in this country, where there is incredible division, not only in government, it's even present on college campuses. And it is not only a time of polarization, it is, if you're not with me, you're against me. It's a time of anger and resentment, where people have forgotten how to be civil and be able to come together and forge compromise on campus issues or political issues or in the community. Remember, Aristotle once said in his book that politics is the art of compromise. It's finding common ground without sacrificing the high ground. If you always want to get everything that you want, you will have paralysis. And our country is in the midst of paralysis of some of the major issues of the day. And that paralysis, of course, is associated with many, many issues, such as the rise of the nativist right, which believes in some sort of romanticized version of making America great again. And then on the other hand, on the other side, those who believe in, capitalism is rotten and it's all about white privilege and we should overturn the whole system. So sometimes I wonder, even though there's a lot of talk about building walls between countries, what seems to be happening is the building of walls between tribal identities. And that you combine with social media, which is the outrage machine, where people can cyberbully, insult others, where facts don't seem to matter. This is the world of alternative facts. So we go from assimilation to multiculturalism to tribalism, which is, in my opinion, a threat to the heart and soul of American democracy.